In the Midnight Hour, Paul Charles. The door slammed shut behind him. It wasn't exactly that the slamming created a particularly loud bang. It was more that it was a bang of great finality, a very definite closure, as it were. "Rory," the slammer of the door hissed, sneering through the corner of his mouth. "So what have you been up to this time?" "For goodness sake, man. Don't you realize the Sabbath is only a matter of a few minutes old?" "Now, Inspector Starrett," Rory Sullivan began, his confidence draining the more Starrett's bloodshot eyes bore down on him. I suppose I'm what you'd call a victim of circumstance." "A victim of circumstance, is it?" Starrett laughed, displaying 2 rows of snow-white molars which created a very non-patriotic combination of colours with his eyes and jumper. "I'd say it was more a case of light fingers not being capable of heavy work." Sullivan began, openly dejected. "You know what, Rory? Do you know what's really troubling me?" "What's that, Inspector?" "I'll tell you, Rory. Even after all these years in the Gardaí, I'm still bewildered why some people choose the crooked path, the path of deceit, rather than the God-fearing work-for-a-living type. I mean, take you, for instance. It isn't as though we can blame your family. Rory, tell me this. Why you do it? I really want to know. I need to understand this." Rory Sullivan clicked his teeth. He was 28 years old, the middle of 3 brothers. His major problem, as far as he was concerned, was that he was born and raised in Ramelton, a village in Donegal, Ireland's most picturesque county, and not in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the United States of America. To Rory Sullivan, even the line that summed up the states, the land of the free and the home of the brave, was seductive and compelling. He had been hooked on Americana from the age of 11. Like a lot of youths growing up in Ireland in the late 60s, Rory was fascinated by the whole American culture. He immersed himself completely and utterly in all things American: movies, television shows, Voice of America radio, comics, magazines, vinyl records, Superman, The Lone Ranger and Tonto, Wagon Train, Cadillac cars, Harley-Davidson motorbikes, the Beach Boys, the Drifters, cigarette lighters, and Bowie knives. He even had a pristine $1 bill carefully folded away in an envelope, which he kept under his mattress. From when he was old enough to count, he automatically converted the local currency directly into dollars. It varied from 3 to 4 American dollars to the Irish pound, but the fluctuation always ensured that Rory was ahead in his math class, particularly when it came to long division. As a teenager, he modelled himself on the new wave of American actors, changing his short back and sides hairstyle with curls on top for a Tony Curtis ducktail. Unfortunately, the end result for Rory was more Carl Malden than James Dean. Rory completed his American look with an extra white T-shirt. His mother didn't mind spending the extra few pence on Purcell. "The results are obvious," she'd say to anyone who'd listen. Grey-black Levi's jeans, a cheap leather jacket, black with white piping, and permanently off-white, more Daz than Purcell, tennis shoes, although few, if any, who wore them ever got to see a tennis court, let alone play on one. He was always careful not to smile when he was cutting his James Dean pose. Only his green eyes and apple-red flushed cheeks betrayed the fact that he was Irish and a wannabe American. "Well?" Starrett asked after 33 uninterrupted clicks of the wall clock. "Listen, what can I tell you?" Rory said expansively. "Really, what can I tell you? I see myself more as a William H. Bonney character than a real criminal. Like Billy, I've never knowingly taken from someone who couldn't afford it. I've never touched the poor." "And you've always proved to be very ingenious in your raids," Starrett sighed. "But my point would be that if you used even a small fraction of that guile and cunning on something more worthwhile and honest, we'd all be a lot better off." "Yeah," Rory conceded. Then, following a few more ticks of the second hand of the clock, "but if I went straight, how long would it take me to save enough money to fly Cherie and myself to New Mexico?" "What, so that you can follow every other Irish emigrant and spend the rest of your life being homesick for dear old Mother Ireland?" You know, you really should wake up and smell the Montbretia and all the other flowers that grace this spectacular countryside of ours. Not Cherie and me, Inspector. In our case, the other man's grass is definitely greener. Not in New Mexico, it's not. Sure, it's too darn hot there for anything, but the flies. Rory just smiled. And tell me, Storette continued, sure to wipe away Rory's smile. While we're talking about Cherie, that would be the same Cheryl Mary Teresa Kavanagh who has just sworn a statement charging you with stealing property belonging to her? Storette sighed and picked up the file he'd brought into the badly lit questioning room, which was situated in the basement of Ramilton's Garda station. He opened the file wide in front of him, as if he knew he was going to need to view all of the information contained therein. That wasn't theft, Inspector. Sure, didn't I get the very same radio for her as a present? I just needed to borrow it to raise $20 to bankroll my next job. Storette needed the file sooner than he thought. By any chance, would that be the same radio, a Roberts US Valve Special, serial number 23091949, which we found in the back of Edmund Davis's car half an hour ago? Yes, Rory replied with an implied so. And would that be the same Roberts radio that was originally stolen from Bryson's electricians in Letterkenny 3 months ago and mentioned here in their insurance manifest? Storette tapped a piece of paper in the file several times with his index finger. The finger was permanently semi-bent, as a result of an accident, and was always very disconcerting when used to emphasize something. The detective was 54, but his finger looked like the finger of a 90-year-old man. It always looked like it might just break off from the rest of his hand. Ah, Rory replied, this time with nothing implied. You see, Rory, as I was saying, if you just put as much of your energy into going straight as you do into being a highwayman, there would have been a good chance you might have reached your beloved America in the next 5 or 6 years. Whereas now, it's looking like you might be going down for at least that amount of time. But, Rory cut in, I can't be put down for armed robbery is a serious offence, Rory. Armed robbery? Rory screamed in a pitch-perfect Little Richard refrain. I've never done an armed robbery in my life. Yes, Storette said, and again consulted his file, an unnecessary but highly effective gesture. And a Mrs. Mina Bates has also filed a complaint against you. Apparently, you threatened her with a knife in the early hours of this morning. Oh, it wasn't anything like that at all, Rory replied, noticeably relieved. OK, Rory, could you tell me exactly what it was like then? Storette inquired, for the record, leaning back in his metallic chair and putting his fine black-shoed feet up on the desk, stretching his arms and clasping his hands behind of and in support of his head. OK, you see, Cherie, well, she said... Rory, Storette began, closing his eyes, we'll all be finished here a lot sooner if you start at the beginning. OK, Rory replied, and leaned in over the desk earnestly. He was so close to Storette he could smell the mixture of leather and polish from his shoes. If he'd leaned in a little closer, he'd have noticed that they were so well polished he would have been able to see his own reflection in the toe caps. Cherie said that was it. We were finished if I didn't come up with the money to buy our tickets to America like I'd promised her I would. She gave me one last chance. Now, as luck would have it, it just so happened that I did have a job in mind. Over the previous couple of months, in fact, and I just needed a small job to bankroll it. Bankroll it, Rory? What's that all about? Well, I needed a getaway car. Edmund Davis? Storette said without opening his eyes. Well, you caught Eddie and me together, so you know he was involved. Anyway, Eddie wouldn't agree to doing the job with me unless I paid him for the use of his car up front. Jeez, Rory. You don't mean to tell me that your accomplice wanted his money in advance? Well, only the car payment part. He needed that in advance to get the car ready, he said, and then I was going to give him a cut as well. Oh, Rory, son, you've surely been watching the wrong movies. Come on, will you? I'm missing my sleep. Let's get back to your story. OK, so I borrowed Cherie's radio to bankroll the job, but I couldn't get anyone to buy it. Eddie wasn't much help either, and he downright refused to accept it as payment for his car for the job. Anyway, as you know, I've done Widow Bates's rectory before, and she was always good for a bit of cash." "Yeah," Storrett sighed, opening his eyes and looking in the file again. "I believe you got 50 quid last time." "More like about $100. I never take more than $100 from private citizens. Anyway, I break in Saturday morning in the early hours to pick up the cash. She always hides it in the same place, in the biscuit tin, which is in the cupboard above the sink in the kitchen. It's always packed with crisp notes, but, like I told you, I never take more than a ton. So I'm in the kitchen. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm feeling a bit peckish. Cherie, God bless her soul, never has any food in our house, so I think, what's the harm of helping myself to some of Widow Bates's food? I mean, she's a widow. Her cupboards are always packed to bursting. How much food does one woman need?" "Come now, Rory. It's her money. She can spend it on what she wants." "Right. Sorry, of course. So anyway, I stick the old rasher wagon on the gas ring. I'm assuming Widow Bates won't be up for 3 more hours, and because our Cherie is always trying to catch up on her beauty sleep, I've learned to cook quietly." "It wasn't the noise of your cooking that woke up Mina. It was the smell of the bacon frying in the pan. That's what was your undoing, Rory," Storrett offered, unable to resist a smile. "Yeah, so she sneaked down into the kitchen and caught me, but to claim it was armed robbery, well, that's just a downright lie." "She claims you waved a knife at her as she walked into her own kitchen," Storrett said. "Not guilty, Your Honour," Rory said, becoming animated and leaning up from resting on his elbow on the table. "She walks in. I've got the bread knife in my hand preparing bread for toast. I pointed the knife to the bread and asked her if she wanted some. Of course I was referring to the bread and not the knife." "I sure hope that the judge also believes you." "Phew," Rory tutted. "With my luck." "What exactly did Mrs. Bates say to you as you pointed to the bread?" "Well," she said, "as you've already got the pan fired up, Mr. Sullivan, the least you can do is stick in a few slices of bacon and a couple of eggs for me." "And so you, the thief, and Widow Bates, the victim, sat down to break bread and to enjoy breakfast together?" "Pretty much." "Unfucking believable, Rory," Storrett laughed. "Hardly Al Capone, mate." "Al Capone wasn't the toughest of the American gangsters, you know," Rory said with a bit of a whine. "That honour goes to a Donegal man, Vincent Coll. Have you ever heard about him, Inspector? He didn't suffer fools gladly." "Oh, I've heard all about Mad Dog, Rory," Storrett said, smiling. "Talking about famous people, what was it the Donegal Chronicle chap wrote about you after your last job?" "Ah," he said, "I've seen the future of organised crime in Ireland, and it's Rory Sullivan," Rory said, recalling the quote. To give him his proper due, he didn't recite the quote with any degree of pride. "Well, all I can say, Rory, is that I hope he's right, so that the Gardaí of Donegal can sleep easier at night. Talking about sleep, let's get to the last chapter in your recent escapade, the bank robbery. Tell me about that." When the Garda patrol car picked Rory up, caught in the act, as it were, they left him in the back of the car while they viewed the scene of the crime, the Bank of Erin. The bank building directly overlooked the River Linan. The 2 officers discovered nothing, absolutely zero. There were no broken windows, no rammed doors, no sign of explosives, no signs of tunnelling on the inside. Storrett had to admit that tunnelling had been his first thought. How else had Rory Sullivan managed to get in and out of the Bank of Erin without leaving any obvious telltale signs? The River Linan Bridge literally ran at right angles up to the front oak door of the bank, which of course meant, to Storrett's way of thinking, that the final arch of the bridge, closest to the bank building, acted as a natural tunnel, which had, as one side, the foundations to the 130-year-old ivy-covered Georgian 2-story building. Storrett had always considered this to be a vulnerable point in the bank's structure. The bank's manager, the affable Max McDowd, would always cut him off with, "I'll tell you what, Inspector," the tar being the local lazy slant on the word, spoken especially lazy following a few pints. "If someone wants to try and get in that way, I'll not only provide them with the dynamite, but I'll let them take what they find in the vaults." Storrett could never work out if McDowd meant that the bank was impenetrable, or that he'd already emptied the vaults himself. Before the conversation went any further, McDowd would add something like, "Never fear, man. I tell you what, let's stop wasting our time on my bank security and pay a visit to the Bridge Bar for some liquid refreshment and crack?" Storett wasn't convinced about the strength of the bank, but on the other hand he was rather partial to a pint or three of the Bridge Bar's finest black and cream. So for now, nothing more would be mentioned about it. That was, of course, until Sullivan's daring and intriguing raid. Sullivan had been caught red-handed, but off the premises. Storett even visited the scene of the crime himself, and his investigation, including a welly-assisted visit under the bridge, produced absolutely nothing, not even a dickey-bird, in fact. Storett examined the area immediately around the locks of the door for telltale scrapings of someone trying to pick the locks. Stranger things had happened, particularly involving Rory Sullivan. But the grand door's 2 Chubb locks and single triple roll bar lock were as good as new. Storett wasn't too preoccupied about the lack of evidence. He knew full well that once Sullivan felt his back against the wall, he would be happy to sing sweetly, so everyone could stand back and enjoy his handiwork. Ever since he had started his illicit career, he'd been gaining a bit of a reputation for finding extraordinary means with which to perpetrate his crimes. He'd spent hours working out elaborate ways for his foolproof, he hoped, escapades. Mostly, though, he'd stumble and fall at the last fence. Just like the time Sullivan carried out the robbery of Bryson's electricians. He hid away in the lavatory toward the end of shopping hours, and then when the shop closed down, he nipped into the stockroom and helped himself before returning to the sanctuary of the toilet. His only problem on that occasion was that Bryson's had one of the most luxurious and comfortable men's rooms in Letterkenny, so he fell into a deep, contented sleep, only to be discovered by one of the staff members the following morning. He had the last laugh, though. They repossessed their visible goods and let him off with a flea in his ear, but they didn't bother to search deep enough into his shoulder bag, where, if they'd been more diligent, they'd have found safely tucked beneath the flask of coffee and his stash of life-saving Cadbury's milk chocolate bars and banana sandwiches, several other small items, and the aforementioned Roberts radio, the same Roberts radio that ended up with Cherry, Ramilton's only Doris Day look-alike. "Look, Rory," Storett sighed, betraying his impatience, not to mention the thought of his half-finished pint of Guinness still standing on the bar in his corner of the Bridge Bar. "Thanks to Cherry, we've got you on the radio, and thanks to Widow Bates, we've got you on breaking and entering at the rectory. Listen, I might even be persuaded to see if Mina could suffer a slight attack of amnesia over the knife incident. But there's more. We've got Edmund Davis 2 doors down, and he's singing like a bird about the Bank of Erin job. So why don't you just come clean about it?" Rory Sullivan rose from his chair and put his hands in his back pockets, Betty Davis style, and walked around the room. Storett ignored him for fear of disturbing Rory's thought process. "Can I plead the fifth, Inspector?" Rory inquired. "Rory, old son, wrong fecking movie. We're talking more Lavender Hill Mob here." 45 ticks of the second hand later, Storett counted each and every one of them. Rory said, "It's all about doing your recce, isn't it, Inspector?" "I'll take your word for it, Rory, but what I want to know is how you got in and out of the bank without causing any disturbance," Storett asked, now genuinely in awe. "Easy. Come here, I'll tell you. Your regular drinking buddy, McDowd, never drinks with you on a Saturday night, does he?" "Actually, that's right. How did you know that?" "Recce, Inspector. Reconnaissance. That's what successful crime is all about," Rory boasted, clearly confident as he sat down at the table again. "And I'll tell you why he never drinks with you on a Saturday night." "Go on, I'm listening." "Well, isn't Saturday night the night all married men go out for a drink?" "Yeah, and?" "And what happens when married men go out drinking on a Saturday night?" "I don't know, Rory. You tell me," Storett said, and then posted a late, "They get drunk?" "Sometimes, but not all of the times," Rory said, sing-song style. "But what they do all of the time is that they leave their married wives at home by themselves, don't they?" This woke up Storett with a jolt. "You mean McDowd has been—" "Well, I believe the way he'd put it would be distributing a bit of joy around the village." "Be cheapers," Storett said, grinning from ear to ear. "And with whom?" "Well, When you don't drink with your regular drinking buddy on a Saturday night, who do you usually end up drinking with on average of 50 Saturday nights of the year? Shit. Gary Britton. You don't mean McDowd and Patsy Britton? Fucking hell. Gary'll kill him. Kill him dead, that's silly. Storet's mind raced forward through several scenarios, all of them ending with him undertaking massive paperwork. Most of the little scenes he visualized involved the spilling of blood. And one unsettling little scenario even had some of his own blood splattered around several walls. Somehow he found his way back to the original track. But I still don't understand how you... Okay, I'll spell it out for you. The Britons never, ever lock their back door, do they? Gary's always boasting that no one is ever going to break into his house, and heaven help the first one who does. Well, McDowd didn't exactly have to break into the house. Patsy welcomed him with open arms. He always leaves his jacket hanging on the inside of the back door. He dallies for a few minutes in the scullery with Patsy. They enjoy a drink or two, and then they go off to find somewhere to recline, I imagine. I simply slipped into the scullery, borrowed his keys, scooted down the road, and opened the bank door. It's a noisy old door, so I used the midnight chimes of the church clock to drown out the loud creaking, and then I nipped inside and helped myself. Ah, Rory, how'd you ever think you'd get away with it? Well, I would have gotten away with it. The only thing I didn't calculate was how heavy the jar of money was. Nearly had a hernia trying to carry it to Eddie's car. Why did you go for the old jar anyway? Well, I'd worked out how to get into the bank sure enough, but I didn't really have time to figure out how to get into the vaults. Anyway, I didn't really need to. There's the big jar of money by the door. It's called the Staff's Pension Plan pot or something. And sure don't some idiots still go and put some of their hard-earned cash in the big bruiser? Some people just need to give a public display of their generous nature, and so they'll throw money at anyone who's collecting, including the not-so-charitable bank staff. Then, one day, I happened to overhear one of the bank tellers say to a colleague that there must be over $2,000 in the jar, and that was more than I needed to set me and Cherry up in America. Ah, Rory, you've gone and gotten yourself into a fine mess. Aye, well, you caught me fair and square, and you'll tell the judge I came clean with you, won't you? Rory said, and then stopped. Storet figured that he'd something else to say, so he just continued to look at the criminal, nodding his head back and forth, trying to encourage the final words out of him. Eventually, Rory Sullivan spoke. Hey, he said, fighting back emotion, I suppose you'd better tell Cherie not to bother waiting around for me. But that wasn't that. Inspector Storet proved that the midnight hour is not as much the end of one day as it is the beginning of the next. Some could call his action good-natured. Others would describe it as taking action to avoid a civil riot about the streets of Ramilton. Storet proceeded to take a statement from Rory Sullivan. Yes, you could say that he even coaxed Sullivan to using particular words for the statement. There were none more surprised than Rory when 20 minutes later he signed a statement saying in effect that he, Rory Sullivan, was on his way home from the Bridge Bar when he saw something suspicious occurring around the door of the Bank of Erin. He spotted someone coming out carrying something that appeared very heavy, and he shouted across to the stranger. The stranger bolted, dropping the jar and a set of keys to the ground. Surprisingly, the glass didn't shatter into a million smithereens. Rory went over, took the keys, and with great difficulty lifted the jar. He was in the process of returning the jar to the bank when the squad car came upon him. Clearly the strain of lifting the weight confused his bearings, so that it appeared he was actually moving away from the bank rather than toward it at the time he was apprehended. Obviously, the Gardaí officers mistakenly thought Rory was the culprit. But, the statement claimed, he just hadn't had time to return the jar to the bank and lock the door. Inspector Storet not only stated for the record that he unconditionally accepted Rory's statement, but he also cajoled the Bank of Erin and McDowd, the bank manager, into giving Rory a reward of $2,000 for saving the bank further loss. Storet didn't recognise the dollar currency, so he ensured Sullivan was paid his bounty in Irish pounds, which was how, 4 weeks later, Rory Sullivan and Cheryl Mary Teresa Kavanagh were sitting on board a Pan Am flight from Shannon Airport to New York City with $4,000 to spare. On Starrett's recommendation, they immediately continued to New Jersey and met up with a colleague of his who made sure Sullivan enrolled to become a New Jersey state trooper. 2 years passed and Rory graduated with honors. Many years and scars later, he joined the exclusive Colonel's Row when he became their superintendent, proving for once and for all that he could use his brain to ensure his fame and fortune on the right side of the law. To this day, he still has his first American dollar. It's now framed and has pride of place among the awards, diplomas, and celebrity photographs busily littered on the wall behind his desk. Oh yeah, Starrett was happy as well. With Rory out of the way, he found he'd a lot more time on his hands to hang out at his favorite retreat, the Bridge Bar.